For the past 50 years, Cuba's relationship with the US has been as tempestuous as the tropical storms that regularly buffet the small island. But there's one American Cubans have always placed on a pedestal.
Bueno, Ernest Hemingway, conocido en Cuba y bueno, en el mundo entero, fue un gran, sobre todo amigo.
Ernest Hemingway spent a large part of his eventful life in Cuba. It's where he wrote some of his most famous books. The Old Man of the Sea was set in these very waters. Hemingway loved Cuba, and Cubans still idolise him.
During all his life, he was a very strong person, and the most important thing was that he tried to communicate to everybody and to us, the Cuban people, that we should feel always strong and go on always till the end of anything.
This rambling villa just outside Havana was where Ernest Hemingway lived.
This is the Hemingway's home. It was his decision to live here in this property. He spent more than 20 years living here.
The house has been preserved just as it was the day Hemingway left Cuba for good in July 1960. Half-empty bottles sit next to the writer's favourite chair. Hunting trophies line the walls, and his daily weight fluctuations still decorate the bathroom.
And this is Hemingway's work bedroom. He used to write standing up. There you can see his typewriter. Of course, he could do that because he never spent the whole day working.
Isabel Ferrero Garrett is the deputy director of what's now called the Hemingway Museum.
This is the house, the official residence of one of the most famous writers in the history of literature.
But the house has become yet another flashpoint in the decades-old ideological struggle between Cuba and the US. Time and the tropical heat haven't been kind to the 9,000 books and manuscripts that fill the villa. The preservation of this literary treasure trove is a painstaking and expensive process. Financial help from the US is sorely needed, but just as firmly denied thanks to the trade embargo.
I find it absolutely absurd. This is really stupid. This harms our own preservation of our own culture and history.
Steve Clemons, a Washington foreign policy expert and avid Hemingway fan, has seen firsthand the fragile state of the writer's personal effects. During a recent trip to Cuba, he asked about buying a digital photocopier to scan some of the rare books.
If I were to help under our current regime to go out and get a Chinese or Japanese firm, which would be very easy for me to do, to donate a $35,000 to $50,000 major large book or large memo digitizer, I would be seriously fined, possibly found guilty, or even conceivably jailed.
The US government has allowed a small team of architects to inspect the house and offer technical advice. But the Bush administration sees the Hemingway house as a tourist attraction. It argues any financial assistance would go directly to the Cuban government and be in breach of the sanctions. There was hope the resignation of Fidel Castro would lead to an easing of the embargo, but that hasn't been the case.
The Cuban government recently announced a change at the top. Some in the world marveled that perhaps change is on its way. That's not how I view it. The regime has made empty gestures at reform, but Cuba is still ruled by the same group that has oppressed the Cuban people for almost half a century.
And what we see embedded in a lot of the decisions we have is inertia and the legacy of the 1960s and the Cold War, which is gone and which has disappeared, and we still have vested interest in the United States trying to preserve that Cold War tension for their own purposes.
And that means this living monument to one of the world's greatest writers could slip further into decay.
Hemingway was a North American writer, so it belongs to them too. They have to be interested in the preservation of the history and the collection of Hemingway.